a sign of the times, but we were really shocked around our office to learn there's an entire clinic in Redmond devoted to treating video and computer game addiction. Evidently, there's enough people whose use of handheld consoles, computer, and online interactive games is just out of control and can be destructive to their families as
Eddie
well.
played up to 12 hours a day, letting everything else in his life kind of slide in favor of online fantasy games. And Wendy says she's a game widow. She's interviewed hundreds of spouses just like her for a new book. It's entitled Game Widow. Welcome. So, when did you realize you were this game widow?
Actually, I realized I was a game widow right after my honeymoon. I got
Whoa, after the honeymoon?
After the honeymoon. My husband suddenly disappeared. He had long hours at work. I knew that before we got married. But when he would come home, it ended up being that he would pick up his dinner and go right upstairs and start playing EverQuest.
But he's got the new wife downstairs.
Oh, I know, dancing around going, hello, hello.
And how long was he on the game?
He would be on the game until after I went to bed. I wouldn't know when he came to bed.
And what are you saying to him?
Hello?
Did you say, hey, dude, this is new and you're sort of, letting it slide a little bit?
Well, I was worried because I thought it was my problem, like something that I had done. And so he said, well, this is just, part of being a game widow. And I said, a game widow? What's a game widow? And he basically introduced me to the term that gamers use to describe the woman that they ignore when they're playing video games.
So is this something sort of like that movie Fever Pitch when he doesn't share the addiction until after he snags her?
That was so familiar, yes.
Right? So is
So
that
you
what he
didn't
did?
know going into this?
He kept it from you?
Well, he didn't keep it from me, but I just had no idea how all-encompassing his hobby was. And it's also his job. So he does it at work, and then he comes home and plays to keep up with work and personally.
So what happens when you ask him to stop?
He does.
He does?
For how long?
He does, but I had to learn that he would. I was afraid he wouldn't. I thought it was my problem. And until I talked to other game widows, I didn't know that we could work out.
I'm just trying to picture, how does this make you feel? You're just married, here's this guy, and he's off ignoring you.
Well, it makes you feel really unattractive. You feel lonely, your self-esteem really hits the bottom rung, and you just have to ask yourself, what have I done?
Is it a jealousy thing? I mean, some of the women in those games are,
That game is the other woman, let me tell you.
Really?
And does he say why he's picking that other woman over you?
Well, see, that's the thing. When you're a game widow and you're new to the whole thing, you don't understand why it's more attractive to him.
But what is he saying? Describe what he says.
He doesn't really explain it. He says, this is what I do. And so you just have to kind of look into it for yourself. You have to talk to other game widows. You have to figure out what's going on. That's why I wrote a book, because there are a lot of women out there who are wondering how come their husband is so much more interested in a game than they are in a real wife.
Eddie, are you just jonesing to play when you hear us talking about games?
My mind wanders a little bit, yes.
Does it? So you're starting to think, oh, EverQuest, I love that one. Do you go there?
I've stayed away from EverQuest for the last couple of months, but as I was coming on the show today, I got actually logged on yesterday just for fun, and looked at my character a little bit, and it's still there, ready to play.
For those that don't know what EverQuest is, I mean, basically you're online competing against other people online, right?
Exactly. It's a massively multiplayer online game, so you're engaged with other players that are running around, you're chatting with them, so there's a big social component as well with the game, because everyone else in the game is an actual player sitting by a computer. So.
See, I just thought it was the little kids. As parents, we're all worried about our 9, 10, 12, year-old kids who are hooked, not our husbands, not our, young men, and not our wives. Jackie is on the phone. Jackie, it's not just guys. How did you get hooked on video games?
Well, I actually got hooked quite by accident, and I'm sure no one gets addicted to online games on purpose, but the way it happened was a friend of mine recommended a Disney game called Toontown, and this might sound a little silly, but
a Disney game?
A Disney game called Toontown, and it's an online role-playing game. It's an MMORPG, just like any other online game.
Okay, so recommended this for your child?
Yes, for my children.
Okay.
Okay, and so
so when the kids go to bed, yeah.
What happened was that I stay away from video games and online games because I do tend to get really, really absorbed in them. And what happened was that my kids started asking me to help them with their Toon characters when after they had to go to bed. So finally I said, yeah, okay, fine, just one day, to help get them into bed. And so I logged on, and I started playing more and more, and I was surprised, and I thought, wow, this is a really entertaining game.
So how many hours would you play? You're sitting there and, figuring I'll get my kid to the next level or whatever, and what happens?
Just like a couple hours a day, initially.
And
then what happened was that I figured out that there were a lot of other adults playing that game, and did a search online and found some game forums, and then actually hooked up with a bunch of other adults that were playing. And it turns out there's about 100,000 people playing that game, and about half of those are adults.
So what did your husband say about all this?
Well, at first he didn't say anything, He actually used to say things like, well, you could do worse things. You could be out at a bar, you could there's, which I don't, that's not what I typically do, but, just to keep it in perspective, there's worse things that a spouse could do. And then, it got so that I was playing every night, and he would ask me, to do things with him, just to spend time with him, and I'd always put him off and say, okay, yeah, just give me an hour. Just give me an hour, it's fine, and obviously most of the time he would just go to bed on his own, and I'd still be up, chatting with my friends.
He's starting to feel
Just
neglected.
Just like Wendy did. Did you like, what about holidays or things like that, Wendy? Did your husband want to do things with you, or was he busy with a game?
Well, it really depended on the holiday.
Really?
If it was a holiday where we were, expecting family and friends and that sort of thing, well, of course, that was a scheduled event. He would make time for that. But if it were something where I were just asking for his attention and saying, I'd like to do this, he said, well, what do you want to do? I had to have something that was actually interesting to him.
You had to have something better
pull
than
him
the
away.
game.
I felt like I was competing with
So
the
did
game.
you ever get a chance just to sit and talk one-on-one? Just quiet time as a spouse?
We did, but it would be few and far between the times that we would get to sit and talk, because he was so busy at work and he would come home and start playing the game. So it was really hard to find that space in between where he was in the mindset to talk.
We're
Jackie,
treating this. Go
wait,
ahead.
can I go back to Jackie for a second? Jackie, your husband keeps asking you at night if you'll come and spend some time with him, and you keep saying 1 hour, 2 hours. Does he just give up and stop asking after a while?
He did, actually, yeah. We had some fights about it, and of course at the time I didn't realize that I was, addicted, which is an ugly word. And we had some fights about it. So then we decided that we agreed that I would ask him when I wanted to spend time with him.
So what bugs you more, when he is sitting there and asking you to, be with him, or when he stops asking you?
Actually, when he stopped asking me and just went off and did his own thing, that hurt a lot. It did. Ironically, it really hurt my feelings a lot. And yeah, it did. It was very effective, actually.
There's more than hurt feelings here. Up next, a mom who says the game addiction killed her son. They're truly addicts searching for the next fix, sacrificing just about everything for the high, and they get it by playing games. Computer and video games destroying lives, tearing apart families. A number of people can't control their gaming, and it's just growing rapidly, this number.
Elizabeth Woolley founded Online Gamers Anonymous after a tragedy in her own family. Elizabeth, tell us what happened to your son.
Well, my son became addicted to the EverQuest online computer game, and he was 20 years old when he started playing it, and it took him probably 2 months to get addicted to it, and he eventually ended up committing suicide while he was sitting on the chair in front of the computer game.
How was it related to the game, Elizabeth?
Pardon?
How was it related to the game?
Well, I'd have to say that if it didn't have anything to do with the game, why would he sit in front of the game and shoot himself? That's the first question. And the second question was, after he died, I talked to gamers, and they showed me files to look for and to unravel the mystery, and I actually did find an event on there that happened on October 30th that I believe triggered his decision to do this.
An event such as what, Elizabeth?
It was a failed relationship.
Online.
Yes.
So, did you notice this coming, this addiction? Did you see it in your son?
Yes, I did.
In what way? What did you see so others can learn from it?
Well, his personality changed. He withdrew from us. He no longer participated in family activities. He became depressed. He actually was evicted from where he was living. He quit his job.
And just sat and played video games?
Yes.
What did you say to him?
Well, he got smart because I didn't want him doing it, and I wanted him to go on to school or to get another job. So he just started and waited till I was sleeping or I was at work. And then it really became a struggle with us, and I eventually told him he had to leave because he wasn't doing anything to better himself. Before that happened, though, I had taken him to professional help, and they just sent him home with me and told me I should be glad he wasn't addicted to drugs and alcohol.
The same thing as we're hearing before. Oh, it's not as bad as another addiction. Eddie, is it as bad as other addictions when you think about it? If you're sitting there 16 hours straight?
I think so. It can have much of the same effects. It's a void that, it's a void that you run into. You escape from life, you run away from your problems, and you get sucked into something that may not be as physically deteriorating as drugs or alcohol. Still, from the standpoint of the destruction that it causes your life, can be...
Does it lose you money?
Sure, not as much as drugs or alcohol, I would argue. But
What did it cost you?
I've bought hundreds of video games, so I've probably spent thousands of dollars on video games alone, computers, the PlayStation, Xbox, and that kind of deal.
What about relationships and social skills?
Relationships take a big hit. Girlfriends, wives, family, and friends, you certainly withdraw quite a bit from them. If you're playing as much as I did at my peak, 6, 8, 10 hours a day, you're not exactly going out with your buddies or, involved in athletics as much as other people are.
Wendy in our audience with a comment. Go ahead, Wendy. Yeah.
Who's vulnerable to it? Why do you think it makes you so vulnerable?
Are you vulnerable? Do you play?
No.
Do you have people you know who?
My brother-in-law, yeah.
Lot?
Kind of. His imprint is on the couch.
So who do you think's most vulnerable?
I think people that are unhappy in life, people with low self-esteem, people searching for a way to get more happiness,
So the same kind of people might be vulnerable to other addictions?
Certainly, certainly.
Jackie, now you say you're addicted and you're worrying about your son as well?
No, I'm not currently addicted. And,
okay. So you've beat it?
Yes.
Is it a thing that you can actually beat, or is it like an alcoholic where you have to say, I'm a recovering video game,
Honestly, I would have to say that I wouldn't go back to gaming,
Okay.
and I can't really even play, I don't even play solitaire, and I wouldn't play console games.
So you steer clear of it?
I'd stay away from it.
Okay,
yeah.
so you're worried about your child, though?
Well, yes, I am actually very worried about my son who became addicted to World of Warcraft and ended up dropping out of first high school, and then he got into a really wonderful second chance program in a community college and ended up dropping out of that.
Because he kept playing games?
Yes, because he was so engrossed in World of Warcraft. And of course, part of the struggle with him was me realizing that I was, a game addict as well, and seeing the symptoms in him. And then, we did all kinds of, things with him. We did incentives and we did consequences, and we ended up cutting his internet connection, which he secretly figured out how to reconnect himself up. And he would, wait until we all went to bed, and then he would stay up all night long playing his game. And then sleep for a couple hours, and then, basically wait till we went to sleep again.
So these sound so extreme, but Wendy, you've heard of even more extreme cases than this, haven't you?
Yes. The experience actually falls along a spectrum. You can, go from mild to wild. And on the wild end, you have people who leave their spouses. One of the people that I talked to lives in Alaska. Her husband was a house husband. She was the one bringing home the money. And he was home playing all day long. And she didn't know that he was married in EverQuest to multiple other women. And he was going off and having affairs with them. And he even ended up bringing a much younger woman than himself. And this is a man who's, not in his 30s. He's, up in the young grandfather age. And he's having, he has an affair with a much younger woman.
So they're
from the
neglecting
States.
the spouses. And
Are they neglecting children at times
Yeah.
as well?
Well, when he was online having these affairs, his son knew about it. when his wife did not. And he told the son not to tell, and he would give gifts to the child without giving gifts to the other children. It put such stress on this child that he actually attempted suicide. And when the lover from the lower 48 moved up to be with him, and he moved out to be with this online relationship person instead of with his wife, his kids now have to share that time between parents. Of course it's difficult. It caused a divorce.
I want to ask Jackie, you mentioned you quit. How did you quit?
Well, actually, what really helped me quit was just realizing that online gaming is actually addictive. You know, because it was like, you know, I was looking at it like it was a personality flaw. Like, oh, you know, I'm so lazy, or I'm such a procrastinator. How come I can't, you know, stop playing this game? How come it's so hard for me? And then I found the OLG-Anon website that Liz started, and it was immensely helpful, you know, and just realizing that, you know, look, this is an addiction. This is going to be hard.
Well, you know, you're bringing up a good point, and there are a lot of parents and spouses out there who are watching and saying, okay, so how do I know if my kid or my spouse is addicted to gaming? We're going to find out, and what to do about that right after this break. Talking about being addicted to video games and online games, and we're getting a lot of phone calls. Julie from Linwood says her son is involved in that World of Warcraft. It got so bad, his attitude, if anybody else got on it, he had to get back on the game, and she was so upset she took the computer away from him. And Shannon from Auburn says, do you guys know this is called Evercrack as well? Her daughter-in-law got addicted to the game, playing 8 to 10 hours a day. She stopped caring about it, and the kids got a divorce over this whole thing.
Well, Redmond's Reality Quest Institute handles some of this. Dr. Hillary Cash spends most of her practice counseling couples, while Kim McDaniel works primarily with children struggling with game addiction. And Hillary, I'll start with you. Is there an actual high, this crack? I mean, is there really a high associated with gaming?
There really is, and what we are seeing now through the research that's coming in is that it's produced by elevated levels of dopamine in the brain, and it does produce a euphoric feeling.
So if you play 3 hours, you get your buzz. Do you have to keep playing longer and play again over the weekend so you maintain that feeling?
Exactly, is that you do develop a tolerance to it, and you want more and more and more over time.
So is there a time that you should stop? How do you know when you've crossed into that dopamine thing, you know?
Well, you get into the dopamine high pretty quickly.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah.
So what happens the other way when you quit? I mean, when you quit, something gives you a high, you have trouble. Same thing here?
Well, it's like any potentially addictive behavior or substance, is that if it's always kept kind of within moderate normal bounds, it doesn't become a problem. But when people kind of have something that they want to escape from, and they allow themselves to engage in the behavior more and more and more, then it starts to develop its own problem.
Plus, you have a peer group that's also doing it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, Eddie, when you didn't play, what would happen to you?
Well, if I was playing a lot and I didn't play, I mean, I definitely thought about getting back on. If I was working and I'd been playing a bunch, I would try to sneak in some game time while I was at work. I remember, you know, getting off the game and going home and sleeping maybe at 3 or 4 in the morning, and I'd call my buddy who I was playing with on the phone so that at the 15-minute drive home I could be talking about the game before I slept. And I'd also, you know, I'd have restless sleep and definitely dreams about the game. If I played a game for 12 hours during the day, certainly my dreams would be affected by it as well.
Colleen was mentioning your son dreams about it as well?
Well, when he got in, I have 3 children. They would all argue right when they'd come home from school who was going to get to play. And I picked one of my children. He actually, couldn't get to sleep at night very well. It would take him a while longer because he'd still be in that play mode, I think, in his mind. But, you know, that's where I had to, as a parent, get in there and limit their time.
We should put up on the screen some of the symptoms. And Hillary, when do we know some of these symptoms are really a problem? These are, you know, if you just have one, is it okay?
We think that if people answer yes to 3 of those problems, it indicates a problem is developing, and if they're answering 5 with a positive, then they are definitely looking at a problem that needs to be attended to.
So Kim, how early can these show up? I mean, what age kids do you see these?
Well, I see children starting around age 6 with their Game Boys. Mm-hmm.
And how do we know as parents if there's an issue for our children? What's the first red flag?
For young children?
Yes, let's start with young.
Often parents come in and complain about the power struggle. that they're afraid to take away the Game Boy because their child's so obsessed with it. And they see the eyes, the complete focus
How
on
is
the
that
Game
different,
Boy.
though, from other power struggles? I mean, the same thing will happen with toys and other things. How do you know the difference?
It seems to be with the Game Boys that there's such a desire for it that the tantrums can be pretty violent. Pretty violent.
And so if they're violent now, imagine taking away the computer when they're 13, 14?
Yes, and a lot of parents are afraid to pull the plug.
And they shouldn't be.
No, because that 6-year-old's going to grow up, and if you can't take away the Game Boy at age 6, you know, there are teenagers who've pulled knives on their parents when they tried to pull the plug at 16.
So we got a lot of kids here who play games, right? You acknowledge that you play them. Would you say you're hooked on it? Would anybody say they're hooked on it? A little bit?
I only do like 2 hours.
2 hours.
2 hours?
Usually, if my
Yeah.
brother doesn't hog the Game Boy.
If
Your brother
doesn't-
hogs the Game Boy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you play a lot, sweetie?
My mom makes me like set a timer for 45 minutes or something.
And if she didn't put that timer on, what would you be doing?
I would put it on because I also, if I'm not doing that, I don't really want to just stay on there and play all the time. I also sometimes want to get on and ride my bike around with my friends too.
Whoa, aren't you a smart kid?
So how do you get somebody in denial help? What do? Do you have like an intervention? Like,
Depending on the age, often it's working with the parents when it's young children, and it's a matter of parents taking back control in the house and setting those limits.
what about if you're an adult, Hillary? What do you do?
If somebody is in denial, that's when an intervention often is required. And we do have a professional who works with us, Patrick Hart, who is an intervention specialist. And he has now conducted a number of interventions with young adults or older teenagers.
This is just hard to believe. I mean, you see it when there's kids who are smoking pot and you got to take them away to a boot camp. But to think of somebody coming into your home and pulling your wife off the computer because she's hooked on a Disney game, you know, that happens.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, our experts say, you ready for this? Kids under 7 shouldn't even be on computers. Next.
Kids should not even be on computers before age 7 because we're talking about video game addictions. Why do you say that, Kim?
Oh, I think for young children, the gaming has the potential of interfering with their normal social development.
Because they'd rather stay inside and do this, and so they're not interacting with other children?
Absolutely.
Does it do anything in terms of rewiring the brain with how they think? Yes?
Yes, I believe.
Yeah, we call it the neural net, and that's just how the brain is all wired together. And for kids who are gaming excessively, the neural net is very narrowly wired to be so that kids can be good at those particular games, and meanwhile neglecting many other skills.
Because they're just playing a Dora game, and that's still going to happen with something like that?
Depends on how much time is being spent at it.
Okay.
Let's get to that. Okay, so let's say none beyond age 7, below age 7. After that, what's a good time limit? How much a day? What?
2 to 3 hours screen time a day is ideal, and that's what's recommended by the American Academy of
So 2 to 3 is a
Pediatrics.
lot of
That's
time.
a whole bunch of time,
And that's
too.
21 hours a week, but many kids will be angry about that limit being set at home.
Eddie, can you get to 2 to 3 hours a day?
That's a very short amount of time.
Really?
2 to 3 hours.
Very short for someone that's into these games. On average, would be probably between 4 and 8 hours, with excesses into 12. I've played for over 16, 17 hours before in a single sitting.
It's just because the game is, I'm not familiar with Warcraft or those games. It's just set up to keep you moving through it. You need to be there.
They know exactly what they need to do to keep you online, don't they?
They do, and you lose track of time when you play these games. You really do.
How has therapy made a difference for you?
It's allowed me to take a look at my life and start to repair actually the elements of life that I was uncomfortable with and address why maybe I was unhappy to begin with and why I was rushing into something else so quickly instead of actually partaking and engaging in real life, you know, real social events and, you know, friends and family and career and all the other opportunities besides just getting sucked away into one tiny thing.
Wendy, we've left you with a husband addicted to games. What happened? What did you do?
Well, I don't really think that he was truly addicted to games, simply because he could schedule his time. He could walk away from it. He just needed a reason to do so. And so in talking with all of the game widows that I have interviewed and talked with, it really becomes managing expectations and scheduling that time so that you know where the us time is and the self time is.
So he
that
still gets to
doesn't
play.
feel Right, he still gets to play,
But
you set in, you know, and it's very personal. We've agreed that since I go to bed at 10 o'clock, whatever he does after 10, that's his time. And if we have something that we're going to do before then that he wants to schedule a special game with his friends, just put it on the calendar and let me know. And that's perfectly fine, as long as I know what to expect and I don't feel like I'm left hanging. So it really becomes a personal thing where you need to manage those expectations.
Hillary, what do you want to leave people with here today? Here's your chance.
Yeah.
Oh, the pressure.
If you're a parent, understand that games are going to be affecting how your child develops, and too much gaming is not good for their development, and that it can even become addictive, and that it has to be taken very seriously as a potential threat from the addiction point of view.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you both for sharing
Thanks
as well.
for opening up.
You bet.
This.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
For information about gaming addiction symptoms or to get help, log on to Online Gamers Anonymous at OLG-Anon.org. Or you can contact Dr. Hillary Cash and Kim McDaniel at realityquestinstitute.org.
Next time.